Hello everyone. So today we'll be going to see this inter question that we might get in an interview when we come to the exception handling. So the question can be, can you have a try without a catch in a Java? So when preparing a Java coding interview, you might encounter this question about the exception handling. So that is this question. So before going to that question, let's first understand what is a try and catch block. So try block is a block that wraps the code that might throw an exception or an error. So it signals to a Java that this code could cause the problem. So let's monitor it. What about the catch block? The catch block follows the try block and handles any exception thrown. It is like a backup plan to manage the error gracefully. Let's see an example. We have the code that is having the 10 is we are dividing 10 by 0, so it will throw an error. Now we want to handle this error. What we can do is we can write this code inside a try block and we can use a catch block to handle this. So let's go to the IDE and see that. Now here what I'll do is I'll divide 10 by 0, and if I run this application as a Java application, we'll get an error. See, we are getting an exception in the thread main divided by 0. But what I will do, I'll use a try catch block, and with try catch block, let's see how this behaves. Now if I delete this, and now if I run this application, you see we are not getting the earlier what we are getting the exception. Now this is, print statement is getting executed. Why? Because we use here a try and catch block. Let's go further. So can you have a try without a catch block? So this is the main question. Yeah, we can have. So you can have a try block without a catch block, but there is a requirement. You must pair the try block with the finally block. So what about the finally? What is the finally block? The question may come. So what is the role of finally block? The finally block is an optional part of the Java exception handling mechanism. It will run no matter whether the exception will be thrown or not. So it is typically a cleanup task, we can say, such as like it is typically used for the cleanup tasks such as closing the files or database connection or other resources, because it runs no matter whether the exception is thrown or not. So to answer our question whether can we have a try without a catch block, yes we can have, but we should use the finally. Now let's see an example. If I go here, we have here a catch block. Instead of catch block, what I will do is I'll use this, just an example. We see there is no error while compilation. Now if I try to run this application, it will be working, opening file and closing the file. There is no error here we thrown. Irrespective of that, the finally block is getting executed and we are not getting any error. So in this example, try block contains the code that might throw an exception. The final block ensures that the cleanup code runs whether an exception throws or not. So since there is no catch block, as we have seen, any exception thrown in a try block will be propagated to the calling method or terminate the program if unhandled. So there might be a question why we can use the try without a catch block. So we can answer it by when we don't want to handle the exception in the current method, but we want to prefer that let it propagate it to the caller of the handling. For example, if you have a method open where we are opening a database connection, and you can use a final block to ensure that connection is closed while letting the caller method of that method like you want to handle the any exception there. So here is an example. We can write one method. I'll go here. We'll create one method. Okay. Now we'll throw an error. This here, what I'll do is we'll create object test equal to new test. t dot read file. Okay. Now here we'll need to throws, use here throws. Okay. Now here what we are doing is we are calling this read file and we are explicitly throwing an error, IO exception. And we are not using here a catch block. We are using here a finally. Now if I try this application, try to run this application, you see this is getting executed properly and the exception is propagated to the calling method and there it is getting failed. Exception in thread main, IO exception, right? Now if you see here we are not adding a catch block and this whatever the print statement we added in the try block and finally block, if you see even we are explicitly throwing an error, the finally block is getting executed and the exception is propagated to the caller method. In this case the caller method is the main method, that's why you'll see here exception is in thread main java.io.io exception file not found. So if you call this method without handling the IO exception, so we are calling it from main method, it will propagate it to that caller, that is nothing but the main method. The finally block will still execute, ensuring the cleanup happens. We have seen that this statement is print on the console. So here are some important notes regarding the question. So in the Java, a try block must be followed either with the catch block or the finally or both. A standalone try block will cause a compilation error. Now let's see this. I'll delete this. Now this is a main method and we'll go back to our first example. Int division equals to 10 divided by 0. Now if you see here, I am only writing a try block. There is no catch block, there is no finally. Here we are getting a compilation error, that is syntax error. Insert a finally block to complete the block statement. So this is an important point. In a Java, try block must be followed either with the catch block or the finally block. Otherwise we'll get an compilation error. Next is exception propagation. If an exception is thrown in a try block and there is no catch block, the exception propagate to the calling method. If no method handles it, the program terminate with the stack trace. As we have seen from the main method, we are calling the another method. There we didn't handle that exception, so the exception got propagated to the calling method. Then check and uncheck exception. So for the checked exception like IO exception, the method must either handle the exception with the catch block or declare it with the throws clause. For the uncheck exception like arithmetic exception, no throws declaration is required. So how to answer this question? Can you have a try without a catch block? Yes, in a Java, you can have a try block without a catch block as long as it's paired with the finally block. The finally block run regardless whether an exception occurred or not, typically used for the cleanup task. So if an exception is thrown in a try block and there is no catch block, the exception propagate to the caller of the terminate the program if unhandled. So what are the follow-up question you can get if you answer this question like in this manner? So we can get what is the purpose of a finally block in a Java. So we can explain like that. The finally block runs whether an exception is thrown or not. It is used for the cleanup task like closing the files or releasing the resources, or we can say closing the database connection. What happens? There can be another question. What happens if an exception is thrown in a try block without a catch? That the example we see. So the exception propagates to the calling method. If no method handles it, the program terminates with the stack trace. There can be a follow-up question like, can you have a standalone try block in a Java? So to answer this question, no, we cannot have a try block. It must be followed with either a catch block or a finally block. Otherwise, it can cause a compilation. It will cause a compilation error. Then there can be another question. What is the difference between try catch and try prime? So the difference is in while using a try catch block, it will handle the exception locally, preventing them from the propagating. While working with the try finally block, it doesn't handle the exception but ensure that the cleanup code in the finally block runs and any exception propagates to the caller. So what are the takeaways from this? In a Java, we can have a try block without a catch block if you include a finally block. The finally block runs regardless of whether an exception occurs or not, making it ideal for the cleanup task. Without a catch block, any exception thrown in a try block propagate to the caller or terminate the program. Next is a standalone try block is not allowed in a Java and will cause a compilation error. So this is a way we can answer this question. So I'll give the blog link in the description. You can go there and practice this. So if you like this video, you can hit like button and subscribe to our channel.